Okay, welcome listeners and viewers. Here you are at another episode of Compliance in Motion, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories, strategies, and systems that power real-world workplace safety and compliance. I'm Tony DeAscentis, CEO of Ving, and whether you're on the floor, in the field, or leading from the front office, you're sure to have key takeaways from our conversation today. I'm super excited to have a leader in the stone fabrication industry, Nate Kolenski. Nate, welcome to our podcast, Compliance in Motion.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So for our listeners today, Nate is the CEO of Blocktops. He personally has over 30 years in stone fabrication industry and depth of experience. Nate's become a leading voice for the workplace safety, especially if you're in the stone fabricator business, because he's working directly with people at Cal OSHA and the California Department of Public Health to really get focused on silicosis regulations. And under his leadership at Blocktops, he's built over a decade, a record of proactive safety programs. He's been very rigorous with his employee health and monitoring and innovating of equipment and solutions. And I hope he has a chance or works in some of his into our discussion today around his innovation, because I've heard some really interesting things coming out of Nate's shop. So Nate, welcome to this podcast. Let's go ahead and dive in and get the conversation started. I think first thing is that our listeners would really like to know more about is what drew you to the stone industry. I always find this to be a very fascinating discussion. We work with stone fabricators all over the country. And to me, I'm new to the industry for about 5-6 years now, but I'm always surprised at how many people get into the industry with no prior experience. Is that your case? Did you decide to be in the stone fabricator industry one day, or is it a lineage of family history?
Well, I actually ran a very successful manufacturer's rep business where I represented different companies to home centers, building materials guys. And I met Vanessa Bates, who was the CEO and owner of Blocktops at the time in 1996. And I started representing Blocktops to Home Depot and Home Base and the different big box chains. And
Okay.
our values, our beliefs aligned so well that in 2004, I set aside my company and came on staff with Blocktops.
Gotcha. Okay. So when you're in the industry and you know that you've got, you certainly have your day-to-day business that you've got to keep track of. You have all the challenges that would land on your plate in running a business. So you're focused on that, but there's got to be times where you're looking for a broader source of knowledge. Are you an active member of industry associations or consortiums that you might share with us that are your like go-to for sources of information?
Oh, yeah. I think it's very important for individual businesses to join these associations like ISFA and NSI. They represent us when we're working on our business. They're representing us to all kinds of different legal challenges and things like that. And then I also have had over the years through the Rockheads or Artisan Group and just guys that we run across that today I had a question from one of the guys and we all chipped in and said what we do. So having that relationship across the country with different guys, we all run into the same challenges, but one guy might have hit it already and fixed it. So yeah,
Yeah.
you can't stick your head in the sand in this business.
Yeah, man. If somebody else already has a best practice, why not leverage it, modify it for your particular organization and run with it? And so for our listeners who don't quite know the acronyms, NSI, Natural Stone Institute.
This was actually a surface fabricator. So stone, solid surface. Yeah.
And then Rockheads is just Rockheads Group. And these are very well-known associations or consortiums that if you're a stone fabricator, you should look up and see which one's right for you, because they all do have advantages for their members that play to the strengths of that particular association. So let's talk a little bit about folks that may not know about Blocktops. Like where you're located. Can you give us a quick overview of the markets that you focus
Mhm.
in on, or the type of business? Is it residential, commercial, big box? Where you're at.
Yeah, so we have a shop located in Sacramento and a shop located in Anaheim. And between those two locations, we can cover most of California pretty well. When we get into Central California, Fresno area, it becomes just driving to that from one of our locations puts somebody on overtime. So we've got a really good friend that handles that area. But in California, if you're on the East Coast, you would drive through 3 or 4 states to get from one of our shops to the other shop. So it's big out here. There's a lot of geography. We focus, and partly because of my background with home centers, big box. That's our biggest customer. We do some very little direct retail. Most of our stuff is two-step or wholesale. General contractors, small commercial jobs that we can get done quickly, and that's worked out really really well for us.
Cool, great. And so as you're, thinking about your market, what do you feel that would, be the, top two, three things that really sets block tops apart from others in your space, or things that you like are sure to consistently do that, really is what the brand Block Tops has become known for?
Well, one of the things I've always taught our people is tell the truth, right? Don't
Yeah,
make something up. If
number
we do
one.
if we do something wrong, own it, right? Another one is do the right thing when no one's looking, right? If we have a
Yeah,
choice and nobody's going to see it, do the right thing. And probably one of our biggest things is that we get the job done quick. I've had work done on my house by other contractors, and they show up at 10 o'clock, trash your place, leave at 2, and say, we'll be back tomorrow.
yep.
With us, we understand that this is a disruptive thing to their home. And I've told customers, they'll tuck you into bed if you'll let them and finish up while you're asleep. But, obviously we don't want to go that far, but we tell them we're going to get it done and we're going to get it done right and we're going to get it done quick.
And these are the things that people definitely need to know about block tops, but they definitely need to know when they're just going in and, to choose somebody to work with, because most people have had a lesson learned or two in their home renovation or remodel or contract, whatever they're doing, where they do have a challenging situation. And being in your longevity in the business and stuff is as a proven entity, Block Tops is ready to deliver. Now, behind the scenes, there's a lot going on. Of course, when the customer sees the product coming, it's been through a big process already just to get it to the particular area of install. So it kind of brings us back to the shop, the fabricator shop, what's going on in that particular area. Talk to us a little bit about we're going to, kind of explore safety and compliance and the culture of the organization. Before we get down into the weeds, talk to us a little bit about the safety culture of your organization, or your perspective on developing a safety culture in an organization.
Well, when I started in '96, there was a lot of people didn't really even know that it wasn't really expected, and we started doing stone late '90s, and we knew that there's a lot of dust and stuff involved, and we didn't know all that we know now, but we knew it wasn't good, and we
Right.
wanted to have a wet shop, you know, 25 plus years ago. And there was still back then, there would be guys that would do, we have to rod a sink and we have to use a drying blade to do that. We no longer have to do that. The technology is caught up and we know that it's the right way to do things. But even lifting, we've got installers that have been with us for 35 years, and you look at it and go, we want them to continue to be able to work. So we've put in material handling, safety carts, all kinds of things to not only make them safe day to day, but make them prolong their career in our industry.
Absolutely. So I think, for our listeners, once again, we have a leader in the industry talking about, the culture of the organization. And one of the things that Nate just pointed out was you know, they saw things that they needed to fix way before it became in the forefront and in the news like it is today, and just took the proactive action. And as a safety culture and as an employee going to work at a company, that's exactly what you kind of want to see. That track record is that the organization just didn't wait around for somebody to tell them to do it. They just knew they needed to do it. So when you look at the environment, obviously, silicosis is kind of like top of mind for everyone in prevention training and all of these kinds of things. What would you list as the biggest safety challenges that you see on a day-to-day basis in a fabrication shop?
Well, probably it's almost the same with any operation in our business is monitoring it and maintaining it. We can have the best ideas, but if your guys can throw the procedure out the window because they have to hurry and get this done, you don't have a procedure. So staying on it, something as simple as just making sure everybody's wearing safety glasses all the time,
Yeah.
the shoes all the time. Not saying, when if you do it right, when you got plenty of time, you got to do it right when you have to hurry, and keeping it safe. So the biggest challenge is just for management or lead people to make sure we stay the course on the systems and procedures we put in place.
Yeah, and I hear that so much all the time when talking to our customers and or through podcast interviews. It's about consistency, right? So you have to educate people and they have to understand when they're in harm's way, and they also have to understand that they have the appropriate protective equipment and or steps to go through. But if you're not consistent in that approach and do it the same every time to stay out of harm's way and or to stay compliant with whatever procedure you're working in, it's those deviations that really start to introduce risk into that employee's day. Now I know you have innovated a few different safety procedures or safety type equipment and things like that. Do you have an example of something that you particularly are proud of, like, hey, we saw this issue and we invented or changed or developed a way to squelch it out and eliminate the risk?
Hmm. Well, some of our partners we use, like Aaron Crowley at No Lift or OmniCubed, we're kind of the crash test dummies for them because we're close by. So if they come up with a neat idea, they'll test it with us. And, it's almost like the Samsonite luggage commercial, give it to the guys and see if they can trash it. And then they'll
Yeah,
go back and fix it. So those
yeah,
are really neat engineering things, but probably one of the most innovative things that we did is super basic, is having the guys water down the area in the shop where they walk to the bathroom or wherever the dry areas are that nobody thinks about.
yeah.
And some of the folks are too young to know this, but with the Charlie Brown cartoons with Pigpen walking through and all the dust kicking up all over,
Yeah,
we found out
right.
we were doing that. So we
Yeah,
have a guy come in the morning before everybody starts wearing a respirator, and he hoses down all the access ways. And then during the day, they never let that go dry because I mean, you can have the best equipment, the best controls, and then have your guys walk across the dry floor and kick up dust in it.
yeah,
So that made a
absolutely.
huge difference in our air monitoring numbers.
And and that's what I want to ask you about next is, but what I think is interesting about the example you gave listeners, Nate didn't say go out and buy this $100,000 piece of equipment to protect this area between the wet shop and the bathrooms. It was simple, keep it wet, have somebody come in, take care of it in the morning and keep after it consistently throughout the day. And I think that there's a lot of times where we go to conferences or trade shows and or we hear about equipment that we could purchase. It's oftentimes tens of thousands of dollars of an investment. But there's simple things that we can do as well, including earlier in the conversation where Nate was talking about just when you see somebody who doesn't maybe have their PPE, you say something. You get people to be consistent about wearing the proper gear, and you get people to be consistent about doing the little things with a little investment that make a big difference, like from the wet shop to the bathroom. Now, when you talk about doing air quality testing, walk us through that process. What does that look like, and how do you go about getting it done?
So for over 10 years now, we've been doing air monitoring, and we were using a company that we would order the pumps and we'd place them on what we suspected was going to be our highest exposure, which was the polishers, and also on our saws. And we would collect the data over an 8-hour period. There was a chain of custody. We mailed it into the lab. Same kind of thing that a industrial hygienist would do. But it was inexpensive. It was $250, and we did that every 6 months. And it wasn't even a requirement. It wasn't a law. It was something I wanted to know, and working with guys across the country, we wanted to know that we were safe.
Yeah, getting back to that proactive approach, right?
And now with the latest regulations in California, we have to do the same thing, but we have to use a industrial hygienist, which has brought the cost way up. So I think a lot of shops weren't doing anything, and doing this even in between the industrial hygienist gives you a very inexpensive way to monitor if you add a piece of equipment, if you do anything different, or you just want to know. It's a very proactive way of doing it. You know,
Yep.
OSHA
How
will
did
do
you
it for
go?
free, but
Yep, I was just going to ask you. So did you find your industrial hygienist through OSHA, or did you find it through your network of association members?
well, being so involved with OSHA and the
Oh,
state
yeah.
legislation, we came across several different companies, and one of them worked really closely with NSI, and uh, we become friends. You know, we end up being friends with our customers and our suppliers, and that's how we found these guys.
Gotcha. And so you kind of stick with the same industrial hygienist, or is it a different person that comes, or it doesn't really matter?
You know, as far as the regulation goes, it doesn't matter. But if you
Mhm.
find somebody that you trust, it needs to be interactive. You need to be able to have discussions with them. You don't want somebody just going out there putting a pump on somebody and then, hey, I'll see you later. You know, if you're paying them to be there for the 8 hours, get your money's worth. Ask them what they see or what improvements somebody else has done.
Yeah. Do you have some examples of maybe after somebody left from doing an analysis that you had to implement a certain thing or make an adjustment? And sometimes these happen because we all know a process might change, or maybe there was a new step introduced into the process, or there was something about an inconsistency over the past 90 days because there was a power outage, or any number of things and factors. Are there factors that often pop up in this time interval between the air quality check that changes the outcomes?
Well, the old regulation was once you passed, if you didn't add any new equipment, you never had to test again. And I didn't think that was good enough, right? Because we
Right.
found variances in weather, um, obviously the product you're cutting, and we wanted to be below the action level, no matter what the weather was, no matter what shop it was, Anaheim or Sacramento. Um, but there was little, you don't get huge changes. You get little improvements. One of
Mhm.
my good friends in Colorado was testing. He found out that if he moved his polishers 8 feet apart, they weren't throwing water from each other onto the other guy. And that made a big difference in their number. Well, not a big difference, a small difference, but it's a difference. So
Right,
just
right.
little things like that. In Anaheim, I have fans that slowly blow down just to kind of, you see them in restaurants and things.
Yeah,
There's a brand name for them, but we got the knockoff ones. I don't need that in Sacramento to hit the same numbers, but in I don't know, it might be the climate in Anaheim is, more foggy because it's by the ocean.
yeah,
But just
right.
little things like that, little investments that make just a few points off of your numbers, and it all adds up to making you a safe shop.
Absolutely. So these are all things that as a company that you're doing the testing and the adjustments and kind of putting the compliance in motion, if you will, and these kinds of things. How do you get the workforce, your employees, your teams of people out there to really engage and embrace, or I should say, like take ownership of the safety that you've put into place and that you've invested in as a company?
Well, this owners that have done this are going to appreciate this, but you got to scare the hell out of them. You really do, because with uh, when public health came to me, they had a I don't know, it's like a 30-page safety thing, and it was very technical. And we said, they're not going to read that. You need a
Yeah,
1-page thing with scary pictures saying, if you don't do this, you're going to die.
right.
And
Yeah,
that's kind of how we treat it. You go, this is not optional. This silicosis, for example, is very preventable. And, we have no cases of it. We've medical tested all our folks. It's very preventable, but you have to do certain things. And so we tell them, it's not an option. And I have told them in the beginning, if you don't do this, you're going to die. So, and we
it's
don't have
pretty
the problem
serious.
anymore.
Right. I know I cringe so many times. You're walking through the neighborhood or something like that, and you see these guys up on these roofs changing a roof, putting a new roof on, and they're on these really peaked. I live in an older neighborhood, so these roofs are like really steep, and they're just walking around up there. I wonder if anybody had a conversation sometimes. Say, tie yourself off. You fall
Uh,
off from here, you're gonna die, or be in a
yeah.
wheelchair. Your life is gonna be totally different. Yeah. So for so many of the more senior fabricators or workers that have been working in these fabrication shops, they've seen a lot of change along the way too. And we kind of get this younger generation, older generation thing maybe going on. Do you see a difference between a younger generation worker coming in how they ask questions or show any kind of concern around safety in the shop versus somebody who's been there for like 20 years?
In the shops, not so much with the age difference as the experience, right? So you have guys that wherever they worked before, they didn't have to do this. So when I implement something new, I try to find who's the problem guy and get them to sign on. And if your leaders are wearing a respirator because that's what the law says now, everybody's going to do it, right? So
Yeah.
we all know who our challenges are going to be. You kind of you pad your bed a little bit by going after the guy that's going to be the troublemaker, and then finding the guy that does everything you say. You get
Yeah.
both of them on board, and everybody else follows. It just becomes the thing we
Yeah.
do.
Right, absolutely, and you got to have both ends of the spectrum. The guy, the workforce that's going to do everything that you ask them to do, and then the ones that challenge you. But the interesting about those ones that challenge you, listeners, is that if you don't figure out how to get them on board, I guarantee you, on in the break room and at lunch and after work, having a beer or whatever they're doing, they're bitching and moaning about whatever it's going on. You need them on your side. You need them to not deter other people from doing what's right and safety, and you need them to be, preaching it. And if everybody's looking at, well, Tony, he's always the one that bucks the system, but he's doing it, then it all of a sudden becomes the norm, and people want to jump on that wagon and understand that it's part of it, and they're promoting it. So, yeah, we often talk to people a lot about generational training and knowledge transfer. Certainly you have that skill transfer, like if somebody's in an apprentice program, working with their mentor who's been doing the job for quite some time. But then we also talk a lot about those new hires that are in a completely different generation, never worked in a shop before. And how do I get them and bring them up the curve on safety procedures and precaution as they're getting their very valuable training on how to handle slabs or overhead cranes or any number of things. And what we tend to find is that younger generation is all about, I want to keep safe. I want to make sure I don't get hurt. It tends to be the folks that have maybe been doing the job for quite some time that we might say are very reliant on the, hey, I've been doing this 10-step process for my entire career. I've never skipped a step yet. And when we inject some kind of new safety procedure, it could be a bit of a challenge to get everybody to buy in. Um, Great idea, I think you probably would agree, is to get those people involved in creating the solution. And then when they take ownership of that solution, now that changes the ball game. And I would imagine you guys do a lot of that stuff as well.
Yeah, and explaining what the desired results are, why we're doing this, right? We unfortunately, when the regulations required no matter what your air quality was in California, you had to wear a respirator. One of the unintended consequences of that was they're not comfortable, and we lost some guys that went to a place where you didn't have to wear them,
Oh, geez.
and
Yeah.
that's not good. But our team here that stayed was like trying to convince them, no, that's not safe, right? So
Right.
now we've been doing it for so long. It's just like I said, it's just that's what we do. That's how we do it. And people will call out somebody else if their safety glasses are on top of their head. Hey, put those down.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. When you get employees calling out other employees to be safer, that's a good process. Now they're self-policing each other and catching that when things could go wrong. Now let's talk a little bit about compliance pressures. So, in general, obviously there's a lot going on with Cal OSHA. And if you're not in the state of California and you're listening, this still is affecting you. I know Nate can talk about it. We're both very active in associations aligned with this particular stone fabricators or surface fabricators and the like. And probably for what about the past, I don't know how many years of meetings. We're going to say at least 4 years of meetings and more prevalent in the past three. Every time we're at an association meeting, we're talking about the new regulations coming out of the state of California. However, everyone's all ears, no matter what state they're in, because they know that this is going to affect them one way or another. How do you keep abreast of what's going on with Cal OSHA in general and the regulatory requirements that could impact your business?
Well, I'm also a member of a Stone Coalition, Stone Safety, Silica Safety Coalition, and we meet every other Tuesday, and that's a group of fabricators, manufacturers, lobbyists, and so we're really, as something comes up new, we hear it, and the folks that are on that have pretty good influence. We try to um, be proactive, right? The OSHA guys said they've never had industry this involved in regulations trying to make things right, so
Right.
it takes a lot of time. But it's kind of like that thing, if not now, when, and if not us, who. So it's just the right thing to do at the right time. And then we try to let that get out to everybody else. But ISFA's got guys on that same coalition, and so does NSI.
Yeah, that's good to hear. They've teamed up and they're working collaboratively with business owners, the regulators, and the association representing their membership. Is there anything in particular that's kind of like top of mind discussion these days at those Tuesday meetings that you have to share or talk with us about?
I guess one of the things I've pushed a lot is initially they thought engineered stone was the deal because of the quartz. And, for years, the manufacturers would say, well, we're 92% quartz, so now they go, oh, we're 92% quartz. And the focus was on fabricators that were just doing engineered stone. But any product that contains silica, you need to handle it the same way. Quartzite, natural stone, is somewhere around 94%. So we don't change our safety procedures for what product we're doing. We want to be the same repetitive safety
Just
procedures over and over, no matter what.
right.
And then you're going to be protected for everything. But that was probably the one thing that stood out, and we're still working every time regulation comes out to watch that language, because you can get a false sense of security if you're cutting something that's not engineered stone. You still need to be safe.
Right. Absolutely. And so then when you're in those groups, does the information make it back into the respective associations as a publication or white papers? How do people tap into those kinds of resources so that they can, you know, kind of feel like they were at the Tuesday meeting with you,
Yeah.
so to speak?
Well, you can always find it on the state government website, but that's a little hard to understand sometimes, when you're reading their language. But NSI and ISFA have really good resources on white papers and fabricator guidance and certifications for both. And every time I get a chance, I hope you don't mind, I'll do a commercial. They need to be members of these organizations just to stay in touch because, like I said in the beginning, they're working for your business while you're working on it. And, you know, it eventually is going to affect your business. So you need to support those guys. And there's so much resources there.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all giving those folks a plug because they do work hard on behalf of their members and have individuals like yourself who are members who are super active in this process. And you're right. You need to be running your business. You don't have time to influence the industry by yourself. You have to have a team. You have to have a group of a community that's focused on this to make things happen. And, so with all this focus really like on silicosis prevention right now, what would you say were other opportunities that people in this vertical space, the business owners, really should be paying attention to as well? Maybe they might even be getting, I don't want to say overlooked, but there's a lot of attention on silicosis prevention, and many breakout sessions and roundtable discussions and conference calls get focused on that. I've heard people talking about the life cycle of slab handling
Hmm.
and or a variety of things like that that probably deserve as much attention as the silicosis prevention. What is there a particular other area of discussion that you feel is equally important?
Oh, definitely. And that's the risk when all the focus is put on one thing, silicosis, which is, like I said before, entirely preventable. We start to focus on that because that's what OSHA might come in and write me for, right? But slab
Yeah,
handling, slab safety has more injuries and more deaths, and it is probably one of the biggest things. We're moving heavy pieces of material, whether it's going on an install truck, coming off a delivery truck, or running through the shop. And I think NSI was pretty smart to put their silica and slab safety certification together, right? So you don't forget, when you get too familiar with doing something over and over and over, you kind of forget that that's a big, heavy piece of stuff that can squash you, you know?
yeah, right. For our listeners out there, if you've never walked through one of these shops, I mean, some of them are massive and they just have rows and rows and rows of slabs, and you almost just kind of look at them and you think, oh my gosh, it could be like a domino effect if something goes wrong. And then they're also getting moved around the place with these big, for the sake of discussion, just an overhead crane that's kind of like suctioning these slabs together. And these things weigh tons. I mean, they're just heavy pieces of raw material. And there's a lot that goes into keeping people safe when you're working on this environment or just passing through, which is another area that we always talk to people about is not just people on the shop floor that need the training. It's the people that are in the environment when they just walk through to go meet somebody that also need to understand the safety precautions that you need to take when you're in a general area, even if you're not the person operating the equipment. Now, as we go and start to think about wrapping up our discussion here today, Nate, I'd like to ask you, like, thinking about advice or direction or key point, what would you share with other business leaders in a similar position to yourself, in construction even or fabrication? What would you say to them is like, if you're a shop owner, I would really make sure that like this was the top of your list in the next 90 days.
Joining the trade associations, if you're not a member of it, we sometimes think, oh, I'm just doing my daily business. I don't need that kind of stuff. And then something comes along and a new regulation hits. And if you're not following one of the regulations because you don't know about it and you're not engaged with the associations, it can cost you tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or an injury or death. And I
Right.
think that's the most basic thing. There's not just in our industry, but there's associations that are for every industry, right? And they're the ones out there with folks on the ground learning the regulations so that you don't have to go study all this at the end of the day. They'll take and make it concise and maybe a one-page thing going, hey, make sure you do this. And then some of the other industry groups. We just finished an association group meeting a couple of days ago, and what you learn from just being around other folks, and you learn by experience, and it's always much better to learn by somebody else's experience, I've found.
Absolutely. You don't know what opportunity to learn you're missing unless you get out of your desk chair and go where the people are that you need to be networking with, your
Yeah.
community. And the good news is there's very strong associations out for pretty much any vertical out there, and specifically in Nate's vertical that we're talking about today. So Nate, want to thank you so much for your participation in today's Compliance in Motion podcast. That's it for our our session today. Greatly appreciate you sharing your story. Listeners, viewers out there, if you found this helpful, please make sure to subscribe, like, share, leave a comment. We're very much interested in your opinion. And if you have subjects that you'd like us to tackle in future episodes, please feel free in your comments. Tell us, I think it'd be great if you had this person as a guest, or if you tackled this particular subject all by itself, which, by the way, is our series coming up, where we're going to, rather than be a generalist on a particular podcast, we're going to pick a subject and let our expert do a deep dive. So to everyone out there, especially our guest, Nate, today, thank you so much for tuning in to Compliance in Motion. Nate, have a great day.
My pleasure. Thanks for including me.